Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be continuing our coverage of Anbennar mod, the massive fantasy overhaul mod for European Universalis 4, making its journey and trip over to Victoria 3. Now, last episode we did cover the initial announcement. Today we have let a few of the dev diaries pile up, and we are going to be covering dev diaries number 2 through 4. Dev diary 2 features the world of Anbennar. Dev diary 3 covers design, intent, and goods in Anbennar, and dev diary number 4, which is the third one we're covering today because we like to say lots of numbers, is covering the magical economy, which is changing the construction loop. Find out later, as we will. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the second dev diary for Vic 3 Bennar. You can catch the first one here, or rather there. Take this skyship ticket because we're going to give you a happy salutation, as is just on the day that we start these dev diaries. They horribly misspelled that, but okay. You'll get a taste of what the world in 1984 is, which is what happens when you don't wish happy salutations. Okay, just kidding. It's 1820, for those of you who can't read. But before we get going, there's an important disclaimer. Shout out to disclaimers. Vic 3 Bennar is an evolving world. Just how vanilla Vic 3's setup has evolved, so too will Anbennar's. A perfect example of this is Afghanistan, which saw its suspiciously modern borders splattered in border gore mess of fun. I guess you could call it that. Shout out to Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires. So don't be too surprised if something changes the next time we dive deeper into the region. Shout out for using the word dive instead of delve. If I had $1 for every time I complained about someone using the word delve in one of these dev diaries, I would probably have like $15, which isn't a lot, but like it's an amount. We dive, we don't delve. All right, with that out of the way, let us depart. And they don't even say without further ado. They say with that out of the way, let's depart. There's no further ado. Okay. The powder tag of Canor. And for our first stop, it's only fitting that we begin with the settings titular tag, Anbennar. For those of you who are familiar, here we have, I assume these guys are going to be forming Anbennar, or this type of thing. I have long forgotten the actual lore inside Anbennar, but we can see part of the fantasy map here. We do see a nice little bay. Bay is, of course, bay. Is Anbennar this continent? But okay, we do see this map here, and for those of you who are familiar with EU4, you might notice the borders, meaning unity, have receded. The consequence of stagnation under the Majorcrats, of course, the history now being more advanced than what it was in EU4. At EU4's start, we have a little bit of a different history, determined to keep the old order in place even as the world moves forward, but nothing lasts forever, that's true. And Anbennar finds itself in the throes of revolution. Gone is the emperor, killed by a teleportation spell. I hate it when that happens. Gone awry as he fled his palace from the indignant mass. Let them eat cake, or whatever scrumptious treats that are on offer in Anbennar, like the loud cars. Here we see President Varian McMahon, and we see some Baronites, which is a unique ideology. Also, we see Enlightened Royalist on this particular Baronite, but Stratocratic Machine Servitude, that's a little exciting. Baronite and Legal Equality, but continuing in here, the place of the Dove Throne, the Black Powder Republic, has arisen. After a bloody fight for existence, the Republic stands at a crossroad. Does it allow for a referendum to deal with the nationalist sentiment and stick to its democratic ideals? Will it continue its bloody path to force Black Powder ideals to the rest of Canor, or the surviving Sumunas reclaim the Dove Throne one last time? So we do see a little bit of lore and mechanics tied around, this country and this kind of start here. Over a century ago, such uncertainty would have been laughed at. Anbennar unified with Nur-Kestir, and under the restored Silmuna dynasty, man, if you thought pronouncing real words is hard, pronouncing fake words is even harder, was the undisputed power of Canor. Now what remains of the Majocracy have fled to the former royal demesne of Silmuna emperors into the Majorcratic demesne. One final shield against the coming of the age of artificery. So we're going to get some steampunkery. Alas, nothing lasts forever. That's true. You said it before, but alas, also, the principle that nothing lasts forever has indeed lasted for more of this dev diary than the beginning. Will that last forever? Probably not. Eventually something will last forever, and that something will be nothing. the heat death of the universe. But before then, we will have, and the so-called mages piece, and our stay in Canor have come to an end. And so we see, as a nation, the Magicratic Dements, which does look like they have a little bit of army, a little bit of, economy, this type of thing. The retreating of magic to make way for steampunkery. Will the mages of Escan recapture the magic of the past? And here we have trenches in the tunnels. Digging into the serpent spine, we are greeted with an unfamiliar dwarvar. The Age of Restoration or Reclamation has long since ended in the West, with the various dwarves and goblin states rising from the chaos. So too, the dark-scale kobolds and even the remaining black orcs have staked their own little claim, keeping tenuous control. But in the Western Serpentine, reclaimer dominance seems most certain. And so we do see a little bit of some passageways. I believe this is through and inside the mountains, where we have the dwarves and the gobos. Shout out to the goblins, they're doing the real work. And here we have the obsidian invasion of a serpent trench, with this obsidian league here. Or perhaps not. An EU4 favorite emerges. Or perhaps not. Emerging from the primeval serpent paths after several millennia of long exile, the vengeful Obsidian Legion has overtaken Verkel Skormandir from below. What will follow is sure to coat the tunnels with blood once more. Okay. Okay. I see you. In the Eastern Serpent Spine, goblins dominate with the Lich's domain, Dakaz Karzivia, on the back foot after the coming war with the Underkingdom. So I assume that's over here, Nizin Corvesto. And we could see they have done some art modeling for some of these races here. We do see that they're a decocracy. And we see goblin shamanism as their state religion. Is that a little keg of alcohol? All right. Not pictured, our glorious ruler. Dak is 411 years old. That is, he looks pretty good for 411. The Underkingdom, however, is not without internal strife, and should things turn sour for them, Dak may be able to reclaim his former capital, Ovdal Azan. All while Jade March watches for opportunistic eyes in the east, betting on the fortunes of both the former command, Heartland, and weakened Chain Grasper. And so here we have the Broken Chimera. In Hellas, we find a land still reeling from the rending of the realms. Even the great power of the Nanhana Ajad has been forced to seek a closer relationship with its once arch rivals, Jadanzar, in the west. Here we see, is this Jadanzar here? No, it's not. We do see these guys here. I don't see Jadanzar on the map, but you can get the idea that they have both a lot of lore that is kind of continuing out of an evolution of the EU4 lore, and kind of spilling over into the next era, which is, of course, the era of Artifice. But no state was hit harder than the once unstoppable command, which is shattered by the great insubordination in the Rending's aftermath that we can see here. They do appear broken apart. This almost looks like the shape of Ethiopia and the Horn of Ethiopia. Once the command spanned this entire screenshot, terrorizing EU4 players. Now they're a shadow of their former selves. It's kind of like the Ottoman Empire. Canorian powers such as Laurent, Busiliar, and the Gnomish hierarchy have begun to exploit this power vacuum and have established footholds. We could see this is a little bit of a highlight of these realms that are kind of coming in here. Meanwhile, there is a growing movement of the Yasheni people to once more attempt to forge a unified Yan state, but will they succeed, or will it end in failure like so many times before? And we do see a nation formation. Is this a major unification? It is, and so a little bit of flavor on that front too, getting to make these giant nations and use these various mechanics to kind of unify some of the old players, as well as make new ones here for Anbennar. Seasons, unions, and the river Yin we see here in this island. The northern half of the old continent, the precursor elves, don't ask how it became pieces. Well, shout out to pieces. Across the North Seas, I don't know if this was entirely populated before, and weird to see this little bit of a ring. Something cataclysmic may have happened here, but there will be colonizable area up here. Across the seas in North Elantir, the Gnomish hierarchy controls much of the north. That's why they're a hierarchy. They're at the top of the pecking order. Taking advantage of a divided Eordand, the gnomes have begun to delve. There we get it. There we get it. It gets revoked. They're not digging. They're delving. Not like this. In search of precursor artifacts. No, they couldn't not use the word delve. No, what a world. Okay. And still divided between the seasonal courts, still bicker. The lands of winter have fallen, and will fall, and summer follow. Well, certainly fall will fall. Yeah, it's in the name. Okay. Along with the Yin, a new struggle emerges following the fall of High Harvora. To the north, Dragon Dominion faces off against the resurgent Sarda Empire, and in the Yin, jockeying for control over Bosan Kovac. We do see the Dragon Dominion here, which was going to be quite large, it looks like, in terms of the number of pops. 10 million, or fairly large enough. I was reading the pops down here, and so we will be having that. Hearing of a living dragon, many kobolds from Canor start up their engines and start driving towards their old homeland to see for themselves. Finally, there is an old, in the Trolls Bay Union, having unified various adventurer states, it is certain to be a major player in the ruined sea full of other Canorian settlers of the colonies of the Laurent. Why is this weird shape like here? I don't even know what's going on here. It's like a massive crater or something. Just like the hard circular line. The end of a journey and the beginning of another. So ends our first step, our first look into the world of Anbennar in 1820. While we have covered a bit, I'm certain you are brimming with questions. Yes, we are. Like, when does the artifice begin? And when does the magic stop and the artifice begin? Drop a few comments, and perhaps you might get to see an answer or two. In the meantime, stay tuned for next week, going over design intent and goods, except we're not going to be covering that next week. We're going to be covering it this week. But just kind of some brief commentary on the world. It is very cool to see that there are a bunch of nations, that they are focused on the history, that they do have flavor. They have stuff like formables. They have various races. We haven't gotten to see the mechanics behind this. Just getting a little bit of a peek at the map here. So let's continue on into Dev Diary number 3, Design Intent and Goods here. Hello everyone. Our Armonistan and Vic3 team here. Man, that does sound like a fantasy name. Of course, all of the names are made up in terms of people probably don't use their real name on dev teams, but also names in general are just made up. They're all made up. A victory team here to talk about what might have been the most difficult part of the whole project: design, intent, and goods. Now, I'm going to admit, are you? This is one that I've been particularly excited to write about for the team. Game design is an incredibly deep and nuanced subject with 1,000 right answers and countless wrong ones. As players, we hope you'll find peering under the hood of why the game works the way it does, and how we as designers responded to be as fascinating to read as it was to experience. Wait, what? Why the game works works the way it does, and how we as game designers respond to be as fascinating to read as it was to experience. That is... I feel like this could be reworded better. But anyways, they're not copywriters. They are, of course, modders. So, the main complaint here, if anything, is the lack of a happy salutation. Shame on you. So how does steampunk punk? This is the real question. So finally, someone's asking it. We've seen incredible art of another world. Just look at the pic below. One dominated by steam devices, analog contraptions, and impossible airships. But how does it work? At first, the answer is simple: artificery, the fusion of engineering and magic. But what is artificery? This is indeed a good question. Is this... Do they get actual artists to work on this? For those of you who are really good at sussing out if something is, AI generated, It's credited to someone's Pinterest. Okay, so this is probably just someone's Pinterest in actual human art, but not art for Anbennar. Always kind of on the lookout for the art in mods. I think now they're just going to start using a bunch of AI, which is kind of a good thing because it's hard to have a big mod team. And so if you need to generate assets, that does make some amount of sense here. Although I'm sure people will disagree with me. This looks like a person just kind of in there. But okay. Continuing, is artificery just industry? Is there anything separating a factory powered by a demerster from one powered by coal? Is artificery just industrial magic? Is there a stark divide between spark drive locomotion and steam train? Is artificery used in mines, like the children? In logging? Do you enchant clothing? Certainly some is enchanting. Do you make oil out of it? What does it do? And how does it work? Do you use dame steer to boil water? Are you using to enchant items? How are these things different from what people were doing in the EU4 timeframe? To even start designing production methods, goods, buildings, and more for Victoria 3, we had to figure out these basics. The problem is that the car is really loud outside, and that's actually a perfect example of artificery. The car is in fact screaming because it is alive. It is the steampunk question. The problem is, the answers to these questions are fluid, much like the gasoline and loud car outside. Vic 3 Benar starts off in 1820, decades away from our Victoria 3 steampunk era of the 1880s, our classic Victorian steampunk era of the 1880s. Okay, and ends in 1930, closer to Bioshock Infinite's dieselpunk and retrofuturism than any classic steampunk fantasy. Okay, so they are trying to import a shifting design principle. That's really cool that they have this. So this fluid principle that they start off with, retro steampunk into futuristic steampunk. But everything is connected. That actually is truly the story of Victoria 3. Much like the people are loud outside. We're going to close the window. I'm just talking next to their car. Much how, in Victoria 3, one of the really cool things was how many things are affected by other things, and you just have, generally speaking, cascading effects, like your literacy will affect how politically active your pops are, which can affect the laws that you can pass, which can affect, like what your economy can look like, and the type of taxes you can do, and everything kind of meshes and intermixes together in Victoria 3 in general, which is why it is really hard to do Victoria 3 tutorials, in my opinion, because the mechanics aren't compartmentalized. A lot of them affect each other in very subtle ways, and so yeah, no being exists in isolation. No man is an island. That's true. That's a philosophy quote. We are all part of one greater entity rippling through space. Philosophically poetic. Yeah, okay, but isn't. I think that this is I feel like this is a quote from a sci-fi novel that is a play on the no man is an island. Of course now it would be no person is an island, but it's a little bit interesting. Philosophically poetic, yep, it did make me think about philosophy. But also Vic 3 in a nutshell. This is true. Everything is connected in Victoria 3, which is when you look at all the mechanics and the way they all fit together, that's kind of the elegance of Victoria 3. Perhaps as a player you may have realized this already, but as designers it has become extremely apparent that Vic 3 is a game of systems. Yeah, and the systems are deep and complex. Each and every part of the system of the game is bound to another, contorting and reacting to even the slightest change across the whole ecosystem. So if you fiddle with one thing, you're going to get a lot of it. When you fiddle with a fiddler, the fiddle fiddles back. Want to add a new good? All right, you start by adding a new building or production method to produce and leverage the good, which means that there's a tipping scales on what is economical to produce, resulting in changing what buildings are built. Yep, your economy recomps around the efficiency of the PMs of the constituent goods inside the economy. Interestingly, tools, for example, are generally the most produced good, and they are not the most efficient, but they're probably the best thing to have a company for, other than resources are especially good, or better than manufactured goods. But as far as manufactured goods, tools are the best, right? And it's because tools are so ubiquitous inside the economy, which is what he's saying here. if you use way less tools, like you don't use a lot of ships in Victoria 3. Ship PM is great, but you don't use a lot of ships. This makes it so it wouldn't make sense to use a shipyard company. But what you change when you change something, if you make a bunch of substitutes for tools, then suddenly maybe tools aren't even good to focus anymore. So when you fiddle around with the things, you dramatically change the underlying parts. Okay, but aside, which means you will have likely now shifted which pops are being employed, which means you will likely have shifted the dynamic power of interscripts, yes, especially if you have, a magistry type of... if you have a bunch of different jobs, and some of the jobs are like magistry jobs, and those are employed by like wizards and like this type of stuff, and the other ones are artifice jobs, and these are employed by like tinkerers and this type of stuff, and they have different ideologies and intergroup types of attraction, you will be able to shift, by changing your economy, you will be able to shift the politics of your nation, which means you will likely be influenced how easily or difficult it is to change laws, which means how tags interact with each other shifted in some other ways, which means you get the picture, or perhaps you prefer a picture. We do like a picture, but why is this a picture of a tech tree? Where's our picture of the spreadsheet? Terrible. We do see some unique art assets here that are in here, and we see some of the old faces, like Pump Jacks is down here, Steel Railway, but then we see Arcane, who's that, programming? It's a little bit hard to read. We see, this looks like some sort of genetic tech, but we see, obviously, more technology in here. Suffice to say, don't you mean artifice to say, we want for want of a nail very much applies here. Living the fantasy versus playing the game. Given the above, we experience incredible tension between delivering a fantastical world of magical steampunk and having engaging content in Vic 3. This is made all the more complicated by the fact that also have to learn how to play with play whatever we make. After all, there's a fine line between picking through new toys and being given a pile of Legos and a pat on the head. All of this culminated in the following design principles. Artifice is industry. As the player progresses and unlocks classic mid-game items like ammo manufactories and advanced production methods, they will find themselves hard-locked until they can get access to artificery. They will find themselves hard-locked until they can get access to artificery? Okay. So they will be locked out of artificery until they get better PMs? Magic is a cheat. That is true. Especially in the early game, magic should be gameplay that would otherwise make the vanilla player go, vanilla player go, what? And as the game progresses, these cheats should become increasingly become crutches for competing with the plotting progress of artificery. So they are overcome by this. This, in a sense, reminds me a little bit of Dominions, where there's the early age, the mid-age, and the late age. And in the early age, magic reigns supreme, and in the late age, more of... massive empires and resources and this stuff reign supreme. Worlds in conflict. Magic was the past. Artificery is the future. The mechanics for each of these should always be in tension. Different playstyles, smashing them together in different unique ways. Anbennar should feel fresh, not different. In EU4, fresh, not different. Okay. In EU4, Anbennar there was a conscious decision to mold vanilla, not change it. There was no new idea groups, for example. Adventurers were represented by estates and tribal mechanics, not custom built. When you play Vic 3 Bennar, we want you to be able to take your vanilla experience, but also challenge preconceptions. That is a tough ask. Very interesting in terms of the design philosophy. And, it's a little bit interesting that you're also, rather than challenging a status quo of serfdom, you're challenging a status quo of magic as part of a design philosophy. And so that's going to be interesting to see how they manage to implement this in terms of game system. Let's show us the goods. All right. Enough high-minded conceptual talk. We like that, though. Let's get to something concrete. Goods. Below, we will give an overview of the goods in both terms of fantasy and gameplay, though keep in mind some things may change, likely to change. We have the reagents. Reagents are the base magical ingredient. Conceptually, they are all the things in the component pouch that the players are supposed to use in tabletops to cast spells, but they don't actually use because no one remembers to keep the Eye of Newt with them. Luckily, in Victhrebenar, we can actually enforce this. At first, farms, certain mines, and dungeons will be your source for these, but later they can be gotten via industry. They're initially used by pops, spell PMs, and the magic system, but artificery will soon hunger for them too, and we see the magical reagents, I don't know how this is pronounced, is a default good for magical items. This is an interesting sentence, though, because it being the default good implies that there is a substitute. We see curiosity is equivalent to 2 units of magical reagents, so I guess this will be the substitute. And artificery doodads, love the word doodad, equivalent to 1.66 of magical reagents, and I assume that, or is that reagents? No. Reagents, I don't know how this is pronounced, but the doodads, I know how to pronounce that. These will be, I assume, the things that you can build through artifice. We have curiosities. Curiosities are your sword +1 and bag of holding, and since everyone loves a good magic item, they are treated as luxury goods and will be quite the rage amongst your pops early on. For the most powerful spell PMs, they are also a must, but their place in the economy will come under threat as doodads flood the market, if you allow it. Damistar, iconic to the Anbennar universe, Damistar is your classic magic rock or unobtainium. That is like, okay, just like an aside, like Avatar, that is the most like Avatar just like very, very transparently just said, we are going to make our entire script and storyline as brain dead as possible so that we can just use all of the cognitive load of the viewer for purely processing visual information. That was like the design principle of Avatar, and they make the magical rock that's really expensive. They called it unobtainium, and it's just the most like violently the illustrating example of the fact that they want you to literally just like shut your brain off and look at the pretty colors in Avatar. Okay, originally desired only by mages, this is your driving force for artificery and thereby industry in Anbennar. Its applications are vast due and are comparable to iron or coal, which is to say, without it, you're not going to go far in the world. It can largely be acquired via Damistar mines, though there exists methods to get Damistar. Interesting PMs. We see blue blood extraction, I suppose, maybe that's turning one thing into, that's magical reagents. And we don't know what that blue blood thing is. Okay, so doodads, quintessential good of artificery representing the fantastical contraptions and gadgets that make the world of steampunk possible. Gameplay-wise, they are the equivalent to tools for all artificery. That is an interesting one. Will there not be tools? PMs, making them, for all artificery PMs, making them extremely important. And that is, if your mages allow such delinquent things such delinquent thinking into your proud state. And this is an interesting trade-off. Like, we have this trade-off of entering a different type of economy, which is an artificery economy, versus entering or staying in a mage type of economy. And that balance is much more interesting, if it is indeed balanced, than the idea of, do we keep traditionalism and serfdom, or / to some extent agrarianism, or do we go capitalist? That's an uninteresting one because one is just way better than the other. If the question is between magic and artificery, then the question is perhaps a little bit more interesting depending on what the gameplay balance looks like. But we can see some doodads. We can see, man oh man, this is used in a lot of things. Some of these look very familiar. Tooling workshops, it looks extremely familiar. But I think as we get to the end, we will get a little bit of a peek at what some of the newer things are. Dwarven Hold, Dwarvarod, serpent bloom farms, mushroom farms, cave coral, mithril mines. Shout out to mithril. We delve too deep. We delve, not delve, not again. We delve too greedily and too deep. Not more delving. Gem mines, automatories, Damastar mines, flawless metal mines, tamed dungeon, and relic dig site. All right. Some interesting ones. We see flawless metals. No fantasy setting could go without metals and alloys that our world's engineers could only dream of. In Anbennar, such materials such as mithril and precursor steel are known as flawless metals. While initially they are largely the domain of dwarves and used sparingly, this will change as relic sites are uncovered. Is this going to be like gold? And the people of Halan learn to mimic and even surpass the metallurgical... Oh, that's such a good word. Metallurgical feats of the past. In the game, they begin as competitive advantages for increasing the production and profitability or giving your soldiers extra defensive edge. This implies that there's a scarcity and you have to make a decision as to what you're going to dedicate them to. Really like when there are trade-off decisions in games, and so exciting to see that here for Anbennar. But as the game progresses, you'll find them fill a similar niche to steel, enabling you access to powerful PMs and other goodies. Goodies are our favorites, or our second favorites after, of course, doodads. But we can see some of the things that they can be consumed in / produced in, and they do seem to be a product of steel mills to some extent. We assume that we're still also getting steel. Interesting. Darn, that screenshot cut a little too soon. Not currently active? Oh no. We cut our own screenshot so you couldn't see the thing. Not currently active. What? What a world. What a world. Okay, we're about to see another dev diary, so that's okay. But we do see Arcane Nexus as a little bit of an extra thing. And Automata redacted. That's true. Yeah, you got us there. Full steam ahead. For the last few dev diaries, we've been pretty high level, but in the coming entries, you can expect to see more nitty-gritty details. When we next meet, we will actually give you a happy salutation, like everyone should. We will open our spare books and cast some magic. Until then, take care and leave a comment. And we have our Monistan. All right, so that was Dev Diary number 3, Design, Intent, and Goods. And this actually is pretty exciting to me if there's especially the notion that there's like a trade-off between one versus the other, magic versus artificery. And if these are relatively balanced and this makes the trade-off interesting, that'll be really cool because that'll make different countries play differently or better. Like maybe elves are better at magic, dwarves are better at artificery, and you develop a different looking economy on the basis of this and have different specialization in this type of thing. But let's get into the last dev diary we are going to be covering today. It is going to take a little while in total, but the Anbennar Vic 3 dev diary number 4, the magical economy. Why not Vic 3 Benar? Hello to Victorians. Wow. Okay, that's kind of a happy salutation, the full cap salutation. Hello to... I tried to enunciate harder, and I'm getting over a cough. I was defeated by the all caps. Hello to Victorians, and Benarians, and anyone in between. This is an interesting statement, because it implies that there's a spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum there's Victorians, and on the other end there's Anbenarians. I'm Lex Spearmint. I'm here with the Vic 3 team to talk to you about the biggest feature of our economy, or our game, the magical economy. In Vic 3 Benar, we've got your Damastier, your magical reagent, your artificery doodads, your arcane curios, that's a new one, your perfect metal, your automaton, and we've got 5 million crazy spreadsheets. Spread them. So at this point, not knowing what is next in this dev diary, if you have any children under the age of 38, I will ask you to ask them to ask themselves to leave the room. We don't know what comes next. We don't know what spreadsheets lie ahead, that we've used to try and perfect the game as much as we can, and all of this has been about making Victoria 3 fantastical while still making sense and being fun. A small peek into the madness we've utilized to craft this magical economy: spreadsheets galore, our favorite. Instead of just lecturing you about why you should use spreadsheets, spread them. Wire mod is cool. Let me use some examples and paint a picture. First, I'll show you how you change the construction. Then I'll tell you the power of artificery. So with that in mind, the construction loop changed. If you played Victoria 3, then you know the early goes. Get wood. We do get some good wood. Get iron, get tools, get coal. Once you have atmospheric engines, repeat. Then after you've done your initial setup, you think about doing something else. That's true. But what if other worlds were possible? Let's say you're starting as Arakpran, the techno-majocracy of Eordland. You're facing an imperialist hierarchy, a triarchy coming from the south, and a greedy Van Bury guild, and you basically have no iron to support yourself. Womp womp. You're going to have to support yourself with magic. Isn't that right? We can see here, that's a shortage, my guys. That means we don't got it. So you might think, am I doomed to this gnomish aggression? This is what I think every single morning of my life. I wake up and I'm like, damn it, the gnomes. No, because we got magic on our side, and that means fabrication, and that means reagents. Reagents. I still don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced. Who needs iron when we can just fabricate it ourselves? By adding this secondary PM to construction, we've immediately created a way to change the game. If you want, you can keep plugging away with the iron-based economy, but if you've got magical means, you can switch to another path. We're wondering how you even get reagents. The answer is there are a lot of ways. Right now, there are basic level reagents produced by subsistence farms, as was done for wood, fabric, and so on. These are crafted by hedge wizards and witches across your country. Shout out to witches. But if you want to specialize in the production of these reagents, we got a little bit of some kind of looks for you. We see herb gardens. We can focus on these in the maze. We see the tame dungeon is going to, in fact, give quite a bit of these. And we see that we can use magical reagents lab. I almost said that this was, the distilleries, but it's just the distilleries icon. Whaling, do we have a PM here, or we just get some magical reagents? Anyways, some magical options: whaling farms, secondaries, dungeons, and alchemical labs. Then we've got you covered. Your farms can specialize into herb gardens. Adventurer carciners can slay sea beasts. Dungeons can be looted for glorious monster parts. Monster parts. Frankenstein's happy. And after you unlock fractional distillation, your alchemists can even start distilling potions and reagents for themselves. I could go on about the complexities of sourcing reagents. It'll be interesting to see if at base values, how profitable it is, or how much construction you get relative to something that's a little bit more mechanical, how they generally empower mages rather than artificers, and how perfect metal complicates everything further, but I'll save that all for future dev diaries. Womp womp. What I'm really trying to explain here is that in Anbennar, things can be different. You're not just playing the exact same kind of nation with the exact same economic path every single game. You're not limited by the barely mundane, and your world is your oyster when it comes to new play styles, new interactions, and new goods. May every playthrough be different and more interesting than the last. The power of doodads. Another core good in Vic 3 Benar is the Artificer doodad. These doodads, also known as gizmos, gadgets, doohickeys, thingamabobs, and knickknacks, it's a knickknack, paddywhack, gig of the frog alone, unlock the power of Damistar and turn that raw rock of magic into something your industries and economies can use. We see the doodads are getting produced. We can see there's the doodad, there's the production. The fun part about artificeries is that they are customizable. Just as we allow for different types of construction, we also allow for different types of doodads. As your economy grows in various directions, you can mix and match your PMs to achieve the best results. If you've got a bunch of Damistar, you can set that PM to max. But perhaps you don't have a lot of porcelain or rubber, so that you can't magically insulate that Damistar. Your laborers might die from magical explosions, that's true. But we always have more children to replace them. But that's a sacrifice you're willing to make, yeah. On the other hand, maybe you've got a ton of perfect metal, but little Damistiar, so you have the beautiful castings of mimic precursor steel that house nothing more than runic punch cards. All of these production methods groups increase production, and you're not required to use one or the other, so you can take these PMs as you will and leave the rest behind. You can also try and specialize in one type of good field rather than another. So we see here we will have a trade-off between or in here in the textile mills, we will see that the Damastar and I think those are doodads, allow us to produce more clothing. Here, the doodads and the porcelain will allow us to produce more steel in terms of the trade-off. Here we can see we are trading off, I think that's doodads and fertilizer for more grain. Generally, I think generally speaking, I'm assuming that these PMs are efficient. So we haven't really seen one that is, okay, in the realm of using something other than a doodad, but okay, the GDP will rise, the number will go up, it will. They do a lot. All over the economy, we've created places where doodads can increase profitability rates through magical enhancement. In fishing and whaling, they enchant your harpoons with electricity, and can be later used to increase the size of your catch. I do love increasing the size of my catch. In steel mills, coals can be enchanted to last longer than they should, so I guess you can compensate for lack of coal by using doodads. In farms and plantations, time magic and transmutative spells can be vastly increase these yields. In lead mines, they can even translate lead into gold. A little alchemy action, eh? That's hubris, mod developers. You can't turn lead into gold. Alright, in earlier versions of the mod, doodads mostly did what they did in the above screenshots. They increased profitability, but weren't required for anything. They were nice to have, certainly, but a player didn't need to engage with them. I assume that the PMs will generally be profitable, but it'd be interesting if the PMs are break-even, because that means a focus on doodads and collapsing the price of doodads will make all the PMs more efficient if you can get the doodads cheap, and maybe you would run a doodad company in order to achieve that, and I'm not sure what the trade-off looks like if it's exactly break-even, but okay. Or Damastar or reagents and so on. It was entirely optional. This was done to allow for different playstyles, but what it also ended up doing was making artificery to feel tacked on. There's not a choice that's being made, right? This is an all-important social and economic movement. Democratizing magic for the masses had become entirely optional. So, I'm guessing we're going to hear how they changed it. This just couldn't do, so in the pursuit of making artificery matter, we've done something rather ambitious. Okay, so we have these doohickeys and doodads here that are used in the lead mines to make more lead, and we see more ammo production for doodads and construction sectors. These are the mechanical, this is the mechanical route going from wood to iron to steel frame with the doodads instead of the explosives, and then arc welded, which includes electricity and doodads. By merging explosives and doodads together, Anbennar has created an economy that's unique. If you want ammunition for your troops, you need doodads. If you want high-level construction, you need doodads. And if you want explosives in your mines, buddy, you'll need doodads. I ain't your buddy, pal. Wait, you might be asking, doesn't that disrupt the entire sulfur economy? Doesn't that change how everyone plays the game? Doesn't that mean if you've banned artificery, you're fighting an uphill battle? Well, as I would respond, yes, yes, and yes. While we generally want... is magic not going to be better in some trade-off sort of way? While we generally want to allow mundane economy to exist on its own, we also want the player to have to engage with the special parts of Anbennar that require us changing at least some of the fundamental parts of the economy. It'll be interesting, though. So it's maybe operate like a soft industry band or an industry band that's not as bad. Now, to create explosives, you don't go from sulfur to fertilizer to explosives. Instead, you have to get Damastar and other resources and combine them into doodads. It doesn't complicate the economic chain, but it does change it. Meanwhile, we've given sulfur and fertilizer more uses elsewhere to compensate. Fertilizer can now increase yields in farms and plantations, especially when combined with doodads. Fertilizer is also used in the alchemical lab, makes sense, to produce reagents. Sulfur is also used in the Damastar mines to increase yields. So overall, doodads can change the whole game. You need them for what you need explosives for, but they also unlock a whole host of productivity enhancing methods across your economy. They're flexible in production, but at the bare minimum, you need all important Damastar to produce them. But don't worry, heavy reliance on a single resource shouldn't cause any geopolitical problems. Or should it? The future and the past. There's a million things I haven't talked about in this dev diary. That's true. You didn't talk about modern geopolitics. You didn't talk about that. You didn't talk about the thing that didn't happen in 1989 spring, which of course didn't happen. That's because there are so many more words you'd read before you tune me out entirely. True. In future dev diaries, prepare to hear about Perfect Metal, Automatories, Damastar Dives, Dungeons and more. Damastar Dives. Is this a Guy Fieri reference? But before we get to any of that, we've got to talk about the main conflict in the mod. We can't talk about artificery without talking about traditional magic. No, that's it for now. Sadly, we'll have to wait for now. When you read the next dev diary, it'll be about a magical system that's already part of the game. Until then, feel free to leave a comment, download the GitLab branch. It is, of course, available on their Discord if you wanted to kind of get early access here, or become part of the development team yourself. And then we have Experiments. Signing off. But that is it. That is what we have here. I hope you guys enjoyed this coverage of Anbennar. We will probably be back again in 2 to 3 weeks covering multiple dev diaries, but I hope you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, and if you know how any of these words are pronounced, for the love of God, please inform me how they're pronounced, some of these Anbennar specific words. Other than that, have a happy Sunday.